Check 1 2. How that's working. You're currently listening to me on the Beyerdynamic. I'm going to turn the gate off so it doesn't clip anything I say. In fact, I'll turn all the gates off. You're listening to the Beyerdynamic GM303, and it's a little gooseneck microphone. I might as well show you. And it is. Can I get it in shot? Oh, my monitor's in the way. There we go. So, lots of dust. This, with a little windsock on the end of it, is, as I say, the Beyerdynamic GM303 gooseneck, and I use this as a interim measure microphone. It's just there so that I can quickly get a mic working, right? So that's the purpose of that. Let's just get this camera nice and... So that mic is what I use if I just need to turn stuff on, get stuff going, answer a phone call, whatever. And I bought it relatively cheap, like all the microphones I've bought and sold over the last 2 to 3, maybe 4 months. And along the way I've acquired a taste for microphones, i.e. I know what I like the sound of. So, the things I like the sound of are Beyerdynamic and Neumann. There's no other way of putting it. I don't particularly like the sound of any of the Shure microphones that I've bought and sold. And the only microphones that sort of sit into a maybe I'd want to keep that category were a Pearl microphone that the customer who purchased it from me, because I was gutted when it sold. Let's swap over to the Neumann. Check. So I'm now on the Neumann as opposed to the Beyerdynamic. So I'm now on this microphone, which is a excuse me, which is a Neumann KMR81i, a short shotgun microphone, which I typically use to do my live show with. So even though I've got fans running, windows open, this is the worst case scenario in terms of background noise. The kids are out, so they're not going to necessarily burst in and make a load of noise. But the Pearl microphone, I was a bit gutted when it sold, because I thought this is an exceptionally good handheld microphone. I might keep hold of this. Hopefully it won't sell. Day later it sells. Anyway, with that in mind, there's a couple of microphones that I've liked that I've delisted because I've wanted to keep them. So as much as I'm not a particular fan of Shure microphones, my daughter, eldest daughter, definitely is. So I delisted another microphone, which is this one here, which is an MX412, a gooseneck. And I bought a K&M little platform with an XLR socket in the bottom and the back, and then an L-shaped bracket, so I could put a iRig, whatever you want to call it, DAC preamp on the end of that. So it's sort of self-contained little system that you can see just behind me here. This. Anyway, that's been delisted, and I'm going to keep that because my daughter does her podcast with it and she likes it. I even changed the cartridge on it to a hypercardioid so that it works really well with background noise rejection, focusing the sound of her voice when she's doing her little podcasts. So that's one of the microphones I'm going to keep. The other one that I was tempted to keep is a Rode Procaster, which only retail for about £180, maybe $250, maybe $300 at the absolute extreme if it came with shot mounts and things, I'm sure. So it's not a particularly expensive microphone by comparison to something like this Neumann that is something like $1,600, or the other Neumann, which I'll come to shortly, or indeed this Beyerdynamic, which is probably a couple of £100, maybe $300 microphone. So these little add-on mics, although I've got them relatively cheap, I've kept them because I know they sound good in the application that I want to use them for. You know, they're very useful microphones. This one obviously for doing my live show, cutting out background rejection, because it's a shotgun microphone, that's its purpose, background rejection. So there we go. That one obviously I'm keeping, that one obviously I'm keeping. I've given it to my daughter now. The equivalent, which is another gooseneck, the 303 Beyerdynamic, I've also decided to keep. But the reason I wanted to keep the Pearl microphone, and was a little gutted that it went, was because it was a handheld microphone, and I think that might be something that I find a use for at some point. I did purchase I think it's called a 705 Neumann handheld, or a 107, something like that, whatever their hypercardioid handheld electrostatic microphone is. I've forgotten the name, but that one, and it's transformerless, had a little red badge on it, and I used it for a time, and I just didn't like it, so I ended up selling that. But I've always sort of thought, well, I want to keep a handheld microphone. Ideally one that's just a good microphone that could come in useful as an instrument mic if either of my daughters start playing an instrument, and therefore it should really be a condenser mic or electrostatic mic. And one that fits the bill is this Beyerdynamic behind me, which when I listened to it, I remember testing it going, wow, this sounds great. What a fantastic sounding microphone. Now, it wasn't cheap. In other words, a lot of the mics that I do buy, I typically get for an exceptionally good price. And it's probably no coincidence that the ones that did cost me a fair bit more money are the ones that I've ended up liking and keeping. And that Beyerdynamic sits in that category, which is to say it didn't necessarily come that cheap when I purchased it. I thought I got it for a good price, and it's been a more difficult item to sell because it's more expensive, right? But it's one of the few mics that I thought, this is a really good mic, and for whatever reason wasn't popular. But the popular version of the same mic would be the Neumann equivalent, which is an electrostatic handheld, and I just didn't like the sound of it. Now, as I'm reaching the point where I'm running out of mics, I've sold them through while the book's coming to a conclusion, and everyone's starting to get not uncomfortable, but shifting uncomfortably as the anticipation rises for the book coming out. It's very much close, so I'm not in the mindset to be carrying on selling microphones. Quite the contrary, I'm sort of running free postage deals on eBay and things to clear out mics and create a bit more space, because they have sort of, at one point when I had the most of them, I made a mic video about it, peak microphones I called it. That particular point, I was kind of overwhelmed. There's loads of them all over the place, and I'm kind of tripping over them quite literally. So I wanted to clear some. Now I'm at the point where I've got a manageable amount, and they're just going to get less and less and less and less and less. But you're like, okay, well, I've offered out microphones to people, and they've kind of gone, yeah, I'll get back to you, or put up barriers that I've managed to overcome and almost force them to have microphones while I've got them. So in other words, no one can say, oh, why didn't you offer me a microphone when you had loads of them and potentially could have helped me out? It's like, well, I did as much as I possibly could. But now it's like, well, I've got these microphones, and which ones might come in useful for me at a later date when I definitely won't have time to be shopping around for microphones. Now, as a YouTuber, it's like, well, there's YouTubers out there that have made a living out of making microphone videos, podcastage specifically, obscure mics being one that's, more recent. And then there's people like Curtis Judd that make videos about producing content with microphones and therefore give you their exceptionally good knowledge and information in video format for that purpose. And obviously everything in between, with voiceover artists, Mike Gartio or Gaudio, whatever you say his name, being another example. But he's talking about mics, but he's talking about them because he uses them as tools rather than doing, specific mic reviews, although it is in essence what he's doing. Now, I've kind of, for a tiny, tiny period of time, managed to dabble in that arena just to keep my mortgage paid by selling microphones and producing content with them, which is a privilege because it means that I'm now sat with a load of microphones around going, well, what do I want? What do I want to keep? So for that reason, I'm going to actually do it now. I'm going to pause this video, connect up this Beyerdynamic, and you can have a listen to yourself. Excuse me. Okay, so now you're hearing me on this. This is the Beyerdynamic MCE91. And while I have done a video on this microphone talking about it being cardioid and electrostatic and all that sort of stuff, really this video isn't about that. It's about just me hearing it and seeing how it performs in the environment that I typically would use it in if I was to use it as I'm using it like this, which is to say it would be positioned such that it's not going to be right on top of my mouth like a handheld mic should be. This is how I'd use it. So when I used the I can't remember the name of it. I'll have to look it up. The Neumann equivalent of this microphone, a 48-volt microphone that's handheld. It just didn't work at this distance. Now, from memory, this particular mic did work quite well at this distance, but I want it to be in a position where I can talk straight past it without particularly worrying that if I do turn my head towards it and happen to do a P, it's not going to, overload the signal so badly that it makes the take unusable or makes the live stream horrible. So if that's how I was using it. Now, I mean, no doubt that this is designed to be used in this way, which is to say that it's a microphone that you'd use handheld and have it maybe an inch away from your mouth and get all of the proximity effect out of it that you could ever want. And this is potentially how it might be used if I was to use it as an instrument microphone or give it to one of my daughters and say, sing into this. Or if they were to do a podcast or something and need a mic that cuts out the noise of the background. But while I'm doing this, I know that it's picking up the sound of my fan. So it's definitely not that great in terms of its rejection from directly behind, because I've intentionally pointed this square with the fan. So the back of the mic is directly pointing at the fan. It should be cutting out all of the noise. It's not, obviously, so it ain't that great a cardioid. But from memory, that's not, the reason why I'm testing it. It's because when I heard it back, it had very low self noise. Actually, that's something I should test. Let's turn off this fan and just listen to the self noise, although the windows are all open. But you can hear me turning around doing things, so it gives you an idea of what this mic would do. I mean, it's picking up the sounds of the cars and stuff. I mean, with all the gates turned off, this is such a quiet microphone. I remember at a time, like I say, when I first tested it, thinking, wow, this is so nice. So, yeah, I mean, I think I should keep this microphone. I think it would make an excellent mic. I suppose the real test is to disconnect it again and actually use it handheld. Now, I've got the crappiest cable imaginable, so that's where it's currently connected, but it's connected into the stand with a crappy cable. So we're going to plug the crappy cable into the mic and see how it performs. Okay, so like I say, we were on a rather cheap and nasty XLR cable. It's kind of flimsy and loose in the bottom of this microphone, but yeah, I'm going to kind of twiddle it around a little bit, and as I just did, whack the XLR cable on my chair, just pass it hand to hand and knock the cable on my leg, things like that, just to see how it actually performs. Maybe hold it thusly, see how that performs, move it around in my hand, just to see what the general handling noise is. If I did actually ever use this mic as a handheld mic, I probably wouldn't want to, because it's expensive. I think this retailed for about $700 when it came out in the 90s. So it was a horrendously expensive microphone when it was new. I mean, it really shows it is a nice mic. But yeah, if I was to ever give this to somebody, I'd be like, do I want to give this condenser mic to somebody to drop and then immediately regret it? So yeah, as a handheld mic, I'd be a bit concerned. I'd be fussy and watching the person and say, look, please don't drop this if you do end up actually hand holding the microphone. So this is the MCE81i, and it's a condenser microphone with a nice proximity effect and a nice tone, very low self noise for a condenser microphone. In a minute, I'm going to compare it to something else, just so you can see by comparison what a normal dynamic microphone might sound like in this circumstance. So I'll just pause the video and we'll end on that. Thank you very much. This is a Yoga Elvis microphone, just a cardioid dynamic, so you can get a palate cleanser, as podcastage would say. This is just so you can hear how a dynamic mic up close would sound by comparison to that condenser, the Beyerdynamic MCE91. So this is the Yoga. It's a chromed out, box standard dynamic cardioid microphone. I'm going to end on my daughter's mic. So this is the MX412 hypercardioid that I was talking about from earlier. This is what my daughter uses for her podcast, and it's at the exact same gain as that Elvis mic, believe it or not, but obviously it's some distance away. It also has a pop filter that I bought for the Neumann microphone and ended up having surplus after I sold it. So this is a Neumann pop filter out of that mic that I can't remember the number of. Someone, I'm sure, will remind me in the comments what that actual number, 705 or 107 hypercardioid handheld Neumann, that this is the pop filter out of it. It's on the end of the MX412. Is that right? I think that's right. 416, that's right. Either way, I think it's a 16-inch gooseneck, so 416, or 12-inch gooseneck, 412, something like that. Anyway, this is the only Shure mic of the collection. 2 Neumanns. Oh yeah, that reminds me, I should actually just put that in as it's the most recent acquisition in terms of microphones. So I'll go and get that, and we'll actually correctly end, and I'll round out on the Neumann that I've recently purchased. So I'll go and grab that now. So in terms of audio reproduction, I think I've saved the best till last, or what I think sounds the best at least. This is the Neumann TLM102, and it's a large diaphragm condenser microphone. And yeah, this is probably what I'll read the book into when it's being read by the author, that's me, as opposed to read by a voice actor, so it can go out for proper consumption by a public that's paying for it, rather than me stumbling over my words into an author-read version. So when I do my version of the book, this is the one that I'll do it through, the Neumann TLM102, because it is easily the best sounding microphone that I've got. So it does sound better than the KMR81i, which I'll flick across to now. This is typically what you'd hear me from doing a show or whatever. My show microphone, the KMR81i, another Neumann. So that's it. This is the end of the video, and that's pretty much all of the microphones that I'm going to keep. I'm almost certain I'm going to keep the Beyerdynamic. I don't know at this stage. I'm going to listen back to this recording. It's the main purpose of me doing this, deciding whether I want to keep that Beyerdynamic behind us or not. As the Shure's definitely a keeper. This Neumann's definitely a keeper. That Neumann's definitely a keeper. The, if you can still hear me, the other... if I can squeeze this cable out. Let's pause it and do it properly. So we're back where we started on the Beyerdynamic GM303 gooseneck microphone, which goes into the back of my SSL2, and just like I say at the beginning of the video, acts as a microphone to fill in when I've packed everything away and I just need a microphone to work immediately through the computer. So that's the end of the video. You've heard all of the microphones, I think. Beyerdynamic 303, Neumann KMR81i, Neumann TLM102, Shure MX412, Beyerdynamic MCE 91. You heard the Yoga. I doubt I'll keep that. The only honourable mention is the Rode, the Procaster. Now, if it wasn't for it being so affordable, I'd keep the ones I've got, but I can always buy those again if I ever end up in a circumstance where I'm doing a podcast that requires two guests and they both have dynamic mics, they're not interfering with each other. Well, the mic I'd pick for that would probably be a Procaster. Now, I've got two of them and they're up for sale, and I'm sort of umming and ahhing, should I keep one of them? It's like, what for? The only reason I would keep them is if I did do a podcast and needed two dynamic microphones, both at the same time, so that both guests were isolated from one another in here. I just don't think that'll ever be the case. I don't think I'll ever have a show where I've got two guests and I need to isolate both of them with dynamic microphones. When I did do it once with my daughter, that sort of overlap, I was using my microphone, she was using hers. Did it overlap? Yeah, but who cares when you're watching Peppa Pig? It doesn't matter. You know, it's not important. So one of those, if I did ever end up in that circumstance, I'd buy two Procasters for very little money. And hopefully I wouldn't be so poor as to need to buy them secondhand, as I'm currently in the circumstance to need to sell them to keep the mortgage paid. But I will keep those mics. So I'll keep a couple of Beyers, the 303 and the 91. I'll keep a couple of Neumanns, the 102 and the 81i. My daughter's Shure will get kept, and that's probably about it. So 5 microphones is more than most people would have in their mic locker, but I think with that I can cover almost every base that I'd ever want to cover in terms of recording things. And if I only needed to add to that, I'll undoubtedly have a few left over once I'm all said and done and I've sold what I've sold on eBay. So that's it. I just wanted to do a sort of farewell to flogging mics video, because I'm sure there's plenty of people who are watching this that are like, when will it end? When will you stop making mic videos? And it's like, well, probably now. I can't think of any reason to keep making them. And given that I've made maybe 100 videos, maybe 150 videos on microphones, and from that I've pared it down to 5 that I actually want to keep, I think it's worthy of making a video on it. And after I listen back to this, I'll make the decision if I do delist the Beyerdynamic 91, probably. And that's it. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video. Earth's flat.